Do you ever wonder what really goes on in the mind of law enforcement? Do you see all the social media online and can't help but want to know what they're thinking? Welcome to the Thin Blue Line Briefing Room. For this weekly podcast, I have my father joining me to tell his stories, his perspective, and his 30 plus years out in law enforcement. You always hear stories about multiple different situations that involve law enforcement. This is the place where we tell the truth, the only truth, and nothing but the truth. Social media just doesn't cut it. In fact, it demonizes what keeps us alive and free day by day. Tune into this weekly podcast so you have the opportunity to learn what really happens, change your perspective, and alter your way of looking at the reality. So I know for a long period of time you were at Grady County Sheriff's Office. What really made you want to switch from your Newcastle department to Grady, and what did you start out doing there?
What made me want to switch from the police department to the sheriff's office? It was a combination of things, but one of the big catalyst was I was heavily involved in our Fraternal Order of Police Lodge, and I became our vice president of that lodge. And one of the duties of the vice president of the lodge was to present any grievances on behalf of any collective bargaining member unit to the chief of police to come to some sort of a resolution of that complaint. A grievance is a complaint. So if somebody had an issue with a shift assignment or a particular policy on how they had to wear their uniform, or a disciplinary action that occurred, if they felt like they were grieved in some way, they would fill out that form, and then it was my job to present that to the chief of police. So after a period of time with that, I kind of became the face of the union's anti-cooperative individual, and it wasn't an individual reason, but that was me. And then, with Newcastle only being 65 square miles, I was getting a little bored, and I just wanted to change. And there was nowhere to change, no different district to transfer to, no real other assignments to transfer to. So I just kind of found myself in a position where I wanted something different. So the Grady County Sheriff's Office was 1,200 square miles instead of 65. And so I went to the Sheriff's Office. Started out there just on patrol, just like every deputy does. Within the first year, the sheriff had decided that he wanted to host a reserve academy. And I had the opportunity to go through the Reserve Academy Coordinator School. And so I had that credential that authorized me to be an academy coordinator. We had a lieutenant at the time that kind of knew what he needed to get done to do all that. But since I had recently gone to the school, got authorized to be an academy coordinator, I was fresh. And so I volunteered to help, which volunteered to help turned into me just basically doing it all, and which was okay. So I became the academy coordinator, and then sometime during the academy coordinator and coordinating the academy that we ended up having, I became the training manager, keeping track of all of our training records, not only for the academy, but for the sheriff's office itself. I was designated to run all of our firearms qualifications for all the deputies every year. I was already an LEDT instructor, so any law enforcement driver training that needed to be done, I was that lead instructor and coordinator. And if any of our deputies were involved in on-duty collisions, they needed any remedial training, that was my responsibility. Ultimately ended up on the TAC team. We called it a SRT team, there, special response team. Was designated as one of the team leaders for that team. I was responsible for the appropriation, all the paperwork, application, and perpetual auditing for all of our federal firearms that we received. We received some pistols, we received some shotguns, we received some rifles, and those had to be audited every year. So made sure that we obtained them, maintained them, and had them available for auditing purposes. Responsible for our application and subsequent acquired armored vehicle. Had a little bit of fun with that one. We actually had to go all the way down to Katy, Texas, and drive that thing back. So, 47,000-pound vehicle, empty, and driving it back in 5 o'clock traffic through Dallas was interesting. Ended up being the patrol supervisor for a while. I helped to not develop, but program would be the right word, the dispatching software that we moved to while I was there. And then I was promoted, might not be the right word, because there was no rank increase, there was no pay increase, but I was reassigned to investigations. And so did that for a while. Probably the most rewarding part of being there was the Reserve Academy that I coordinated, was designated as the lead instructor for. Taught a few of the classes itself, but I don't know if you want to go into the Reserve Academy part of it or not. We going there? Just keep talking? Just keep blabbing away? So, a Reserve Peace Officer Academy is 240 hours of training. And if completed and the test is passed, the cadets receive a Reserve Peace Officer certification for the state of Oklahoma, which is roughly half of the hours as a full-time peace officer. And so the coordinating part of that is exactly that, coordinating. I had to find locations to where we could have classes, had to find locations where we could do practical exercises, had to find locations where we could do our defensive tactics, where we could do our driver training, where we could do our collision investigations, where we could do our firearms. And then, of course, I had to coordinate instructors for that. Now, we could have kept it all completely in-house with instructors that worked for the sheriff's office. I could have taught most of all of it, minus a few things that require specialties for. I'll get into that part. But I took it upon myself to utilize the contacts that I made over my career to bring in subject matter experts to teach their subject matters. So our district attorney came in and taught our law block. I brought in OSBI to teach criminal investigations portions, crime scene investigations. Brought in their latent print experts to come in and teach fingerprinting. Brought in retired full-time academy instructors for our firearms block. Well-known individuals, Bill Bullard, Vince O'Neill. That was the two main firearms instructors for our block. Brought in other subject matter experts for like the collision investigation. Brought in guys that do that every day. Let's see. There's a multitude. Just trying to go through kind of the list of the big ones. Our district judge was willing to participate in our courtroom practicums. Not only utilizing his courtroom, but he was there. Our lead district attorney and assistant district attorney were there as the attorneys during courtroom practicums. We utilized reports that were made at a scenario that was put together at the beginning of the academy, ultimately for those cadets to testify in the courtroom practicums for. So it was just, it was building blocks, start at the beginning and keep adding to everything. Ultimately, it finished out. We started, I believe, with 28, and I believe we graduated 24. A couple quit. One was released. I believe one just quit their job. That's been a few years now, so I don't remember exactly. But also part of that coordination was I didn't reinvent the wheel. I didn't write our own policies, procedures, rules, or anything like that. I just used the full-time academy rules and regulations as far as uniform and attendance and hygiene and all that stuff, and just took Cleet's name off of it and put our sheriff's office name on it, and changed whatever needed to be changed, full-time versus reserve. Had it, reviewed by Cleet, had it reviewed by the sheriff, and signed off on, and it became our rules. So, obviously, Cleet provided all of the curriculum, so we were not rewriting that. We were not dreaming it up. We had inspections. We had requirements, like I said, for attendance. We had requirements for uniforms. And I feel like even to this day, I still run into cadets that were in that academy that still thank me for running it the way that we did, because they were able to go through the Bridge Academy and become a full-time certified peace officer, which the Bridge Academy is a condensed version from the full-time. But in order to qualify for the Bridge, they had to have attended a 240-hour reserve academy. And so the way that we ran it prepared them for the way that they run it at the full-time academy.
And real quick, will you just kind of explain what CLEAT is real quick? Because it's a...
CLEAT is the state agency. CLEAT's an acronym for the Council on Law Enforcement Education and Training. It's a state agency that has the authority, I guess would be the right word to articulate. They are the certifying agency for peace officers in the state of Oklahoma.
And will you just kind of go into detail and kind of explain one of the scenarios that you would put your students through to have them practice their skills?
Yeah, I can go over a couple, two or three different ones. At the very beginning of the academy, we had a scenario occur outside of the VOTEC, which was where we were holding our classroom portions, and put everybody on break, told them they might want to pay attention to things that they hear, things they see, things they smell when we go outside. And so I had coordinated a role player, couple of role players, to fire off some rounds on a blank adapter pistol, and then another role player in a car kind of peel out and speed off, and then whenever the students went around the corner to investigate what they heard, they found another role player on the ground pretending to be a victim of a shooting. And so I had already prearranged for the fire department to arrive with their ambulance to render medical aid to this victim. Subsequently, hauled them off, drove them around the corner, dropped them back off. But after that was done, we went back into the classroom, and I told them, I said, give you a little bit of time, make your notes, get your thoughts together, because we're going to write a report on the incident that you were just witness to. Now, they had no interaction. They did not ask questions. They were not part of that scenario. They were just witnesses. So I had them write a report as a witness to that. And they all were close. There were various versions of what they heard and what they saw. The assumption right away was wherever that gunfire came from, they must have sped off in that vehicle and that was the victim. Well, really what had happened is he fell off the roof and he just happened to be laying there while somebody else peeled out in a car, and the gunshot was actually somebody else that fired a gun and then walked inside the building. So none of them actually had anything to do with each other, but we discussed that kind of later on about don't testify and put in your report things that are assumptions. Testify that you heard this, you saw this, and put the facts in the reports. So that was one initial scenario. We had building searches, to where we found a couple of locations, one of them being a school, where we put bad guys in the school with some simulation firearms, and then we had the good guys go in to try to find the bad guys. You and your brother happened to be a couple of the bad guys more than once. So we'd put you in there and have you hide somewhere and give you some pistols to be able to fire some simulation rounds back at the good guys as they're trying to find you. And I think you got a few shots off every now and then, that's for sure. And so we teach them building clearing techniques. We teach them how to approach a building or a house or a commercial structure or a school. Take into some of the considerations of daytime, nighttime. Should there be people there? Should there not be people there? Did you observe vehicles? Does it look like there's a function going on? Is it a family cookout? Is there a basketball game? Does it look like there's cheer practice? And then we discuss how to make entry into those locations, whether it's forced entry, whether you find an open door. Do you try the door, just see if it's unlocked before you even try to pry it open? Different things. And then some of the techniques about how you enter and do you go by the doors that are open? Do you go by the doors that are closed? Do you assume that somebody might be in there, might not be in there? I don't want to give too many tactics away because you never know where the videos are going to go, and you never know who's going to study them somewhere down the line. And I don't want to give away any of our trade secrets. It's not real secret. I'm sure you could YouTube it and Google it and find all kinds of stuff, but I don't want to be that person that puts some of it out there. But we would give, that would be another scenario for like the collision investigations. I actually put together 3 different collisions, mock collisions. If you happen to remember one of them, you were involved. We had your mom's car. We had her as a driver. We brought your bicycle. We kind of shoved your bicycle underneath the front of our car and then had you lay down out there. And when the cadet arrived to that particular scene, they had to control the scene, make sure that it was safe. Your mom's over there acting all frantic. Oh my God, I ran over a kid. Control her, but then do you render aid, and what do you do? They had to try to kind of figure that out. And then we had another ambulance in that scenario as well. And so loaded you up on the backboard, put you in the ambulance. Then of course they have to collect all that information and then subsequently draw a diagram and put the car on the diagram and measure everything out. And where were you found? Did they collect your information before you went to the hospital? Did they get all of her information? I had 3 different stations, 3 different scenarios set up. So all of the cadets got to go through each one of those. And so by the time that particular scenario was done, they had 3 different collisions that they could write up. And then we built on that later as well. Domestic practicums. We were able to locate a house that was going to eventually be torn down, but it was still furnished, and we were able to get some role players to come in and pretend that they were engaged in an altercation of some kind, and then we had cadets, take into considerations when you arrive here, where do you park? How do you approach the house? And when you're backlit, or how do you knock on the door? Where do you stand? What do you say if somebody meets you at the door? What do you say if nobody comes to the door? What can you or what can you not do to enter that house if you hear what sounds like an altercation going on, or is somebody screaming for help? What are the signs? What gives you probable cause to believe that a crime is occurring? So we would go over all those considerations, and then once we got them in, then they had to deal with, did they have to physically break anything up? Is there visible signs of injury? Was one accusing the other? And make them go through a reality-based scenario. And in that particular case, they had already done their use of force blocks. They'd already done their custody and control blocks, their defensive tactics. And so we actually applied some use of force in that domestic practicum scenario, to where there were no striking, no punches, no kicks, no weapons, but hands-on, arm bars, wrist locks, things like that. And it got a little bit carried away a couple of times. We had to blow the whistle and stop, but there was a nickname given to one of the cadets during that particular block. A good buddy of mine, Chad, he got nicknamed Dozer, because that's how he came in the room. And so that's just a few examples of some of the reality-based scenarios that we would put together for some of the training.
Well, that's going to be it for this third podcast. Be sure to tune in weekly for this next episode, and we'll see you then.
See you later.